Mukotoni wokaya ya ionalelo mukotoni wokaya ya iwokaya pia waona lavana owe lelo ionalelo owe lelo iwokaya pia waona lavana owe lelo ionalelo owe lelo iwokaya pia waona ulavana owe lelo ionalelo owe lelo iwokaya pia waona ulavana owe Chambe shina posa ionalelo chambe shina posa neshita shani ne waluokoa owe lelo ionalelo owe lelo neshita shani ne waluokoa owe lelo ionalelo owe lelo neshita shani ne waluokoa owe lelo ionalelo owe lelo neshita shani ne waluokoa owe suntilo mwana yo walelo suntilo mwana wandina suma kumalona owe suntilo mwana yo walelo suntilo mwana wandina suma kumalona owe Chambe shina posa chambe shina posa me wano owa
Akashabatu WhatsApp audio.
Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching us all over the world, welcome to this special edition of the TV Bakwetu program. By the way, that lovely song is called Mukonto by one of our brothers, Chasaya Sichilima, featuring the Sakara brothers. Today, we're going to continue talking about HH's legacy and UPND government. So the question of today's program is that legacy still on course? And with me, I've got my friend and my colleague, Mr. Nason Bimbe. Mr. Bimbe, welcome to the program. And please introduce yourself to the audience before we start.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya, for having me on the program. And welcome to all you viewers. And please, if you have questions or remarks or anything, just post them on the various social media forum attached to this show.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bimbe. And our viewers, wherever you're watching us, you're free to join us. Ask any questions. You can ask questions on the comments on Facebook, YouTube, and also I've posted the link on Facebook and YouTube. You can join us, and we'll allow you to ask a question. And today, in the background, we are joined by our colleague, Nukiwe Piri Ramara. Nukiwe she's in the background. She won't have a video, but we'll bring her at one point, for her to make some comments or ask some questions. Welcome, Nukiwe. So without wasting our time, I've already explained what our theme is today. We're still talking about HH and UPND government legacy. And the question today is that legacy still on course? The show tonight is a continuation, as I've said, of the discussion about how HH and by extension UPN government's legacy will look like 5 years or if possible 10 years from now. In the first show on the 12th of August 2022, we briefly discussed what areas the legacy would cover, and these were creating and sustaining democratic institutions, having a stable foreign policy, stabilizing the macroeconomic fundamentals, flagging revenue leakages as known as corruption and resource mismanagement, embedding the rule of law, making the abnormal become normal again, and having an enabling business environment. So in the second show on the 19th of December 2022, which is just last Monday or Sunday, we posed the question, is this legacy about to be derailed? In that respect, we offered our opinion and suggested what needs to be done to make sure that the path to the legacy is on course. In this third installment, we continue with a discussion which mostly center on the president's press conference, which was held on the 20th of December 2022. And for this, we'll look at the following topics and more or less the same questions. So about HH's press conference on the 20th of December 2022, how did it fare? And did it cover all important issues? What are the takeaways from that press conference? Did the president miss an opportunity to reshuffle the pack? That's what some opposition aspirant candidates said. How can you have a press conference without reshuffles? Anyway, we'll talk about that. Reaction from the opposition and the citizens. And how did the press fare this time? Previously, we've talked about the press and their role as the said estate. We'll talk about that today. And then finally, whilst we are debating the legacy of HH and UPND government, and if it's on course or possible derailment, there are some other issues that happened, just today or yesterday. And it's about the story of one of our friends from the Alliance, Tabo Kawana, with the Director of Information at one of the ministries. And we'll also talk about that issue. Mr. Bimbe, welcome back to the program once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya.
Okay, so let's get into the program now. So you know about the press conference. You've watched the videos. You've watched the comments from opposition. How did it fare, and did it cover all important issues? Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya. I've watched the press conference. I always scan through the media, the comments, and online news from Zambia. So from the press conference perspective, I take it. I mean, for me, it was very clear. The press conference was really quite short in a way, and a lot of details. And thank you to the press for being so organized and for posing really difficult but important questions to the president. So the bulk of that press conference was actually responding to the questions from the media, which I thought was a brilliant idea in the sense that it became a conversation, bringing out the issues that are really burning issues that people, citizens, have in their mind. To sum it all, I think from my point of view, the president was brilliant. He covered all the important issues that were there. And it just bothers me. Sometimes I wonder where the oppositions tried to get some of the information they got out of that press conference, because the president was very, very clear. And we've been on about talking about, this path to the legacy. And I think watching that press conference, listening to the president articulate the issues, I'm convinced very convinced that everything is on course. Of course, there are little things that crop up here and there, as in any big family. There are little issues that can crop up here and there. But I think the bulk or the bigger picture issues, they are on course, and that is the most important thing.
I can't agree with you anymore. I think, to start with, your question is fantastic. And I think I watched the program. I was working, but I watched it throughout. And I 100% agree with you. The president, dealt with almost everything. And the legacy, I believe, is on course. Nukiwe, though we are not showing you, you're showing your video. I hope you've been listening. How
Yes, I am.
how do you think the president fare, and did he deal with all the pressing issues? And by the way, first introduce yourself, who you are.
Okay. So my name is Nukiwe. I prefer that name, although my first name is Rachel. So if people see Rachel somewhere, it's the same thing, or it's the same person. I am based in South Africa, a patriot first, and then a supporter or a sympathizer of the United Party for National Development, UPND. And I took it upon myself to be part of the change that we see today. And the change was just the beginning, and now is to see the things that were promised into effect. And I've taken it upon myself again to be part of the development of Zambia, as it were. So yes, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, so the question is, how did the president fare? Did he deal with all the pressing issues?
Look, I think first and foremost, it must be commended that he's very consistent. Everything he said is not something that we've not heard before. And obviously, right now, we're looking for deliverables. So for me, I think the first thing that was very impressive is that he continues to talk to us at an appointed time. It's not something that we were used to listen to the president and his thoughts every quarter, for that matter. And so that for me was impressive. Again, like I said, everything he said is not something we've heard before. We've not heard before. And it was good to see that there's actionables or there's movements towards a lot of the plans that the party had or campaigned on. So granted, we might not see the actual nitty-gritty or the details of what it is that was promised, but I think from my perspective, the plan is intact, and he articulated the plan once again very well. And a lot has been done in this 1 year towards the achievement of those things that were promised. I do think, though, that and I say this with love for my for my country and for my president. There's people that have the gift of the gab, and in the previous governments, we saw people that were able to speak directly to the common man on the ground. They've got the gift of the gab, and they can articulate themselves in a way that people on the ground understand the message straightforward, clear, even if sometimes it was lies. But I do think the president does need help to articulate the message that he delivers at that level to the ground and to the micro level, because for a lot of people, it's a very, very high level conversation. Not that there's anything wrong with it. That's why he's got ministers and people that can now disseminate this information. It's just that as Zambians, we were used to presidents that could speak directly to the ground, if you know what I mean. And I think there might be a bit of improvement in the future. Thanks.
That's fantastic, Nukiwe. Stay around as we continue discussing that press conference. Mr. Bimbe, Nukiwe, Nukiwe, who is one of our comrades in the fight for a better, equitable, prosperous Zambia. So she was one of our fellow soldiers in the dungeons. She's mentioned something like delivering, HH. It's like what she's saying is HH uh, 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 talked about very important issues, and at the highest level. But what Nikiwe is saying is that information being channeled to the lowest level, including the language that people can understand. And if it's not happening, how should it happen? What can you say about that, Mr. Bimbe? This is what we've been talking about most of the time.
Thank you very much for the great question. And first of all, thank you, Nokiwe. How are you? Welcome to the show. It's very nice to have you here looking at these issues.
Thank you so much.
The issues that Nokiwe has actually highlighted in terms of having a communication strategy or that is really accessible to the majority of the people is a challenge, and we've constantly on some of the on the shows here we've always talked about that. That is very, very important. The issue, I can't say where the issue is, but I suspect one would have thought this is a new government, they are learning the ropes. However, as we've said, they should have been prepared, or rather we should have been prepared on how to translate these big picture issues or narratives that are being spoken about by the president into the language that our people on the ground, everybody, regardless, could understand and go with that narrative. That is very important. And today's world is, we are lucky. We live in a world that is really connected via digital tools. And one would have thought by now we would have harnessed that technology to, if so effectively, to provide that information. But as well as there is a question that I think our elder journalist, Mr. Frank Mutulila, Ambassador Frank Mutulila, mentioned that we hope there will be more government visibility in 2023, and this is one of the cornerstones that we need. I think we need to have a clear strategy on how we communicate. We need not to be jumping on, simple statement. For example, the UPND Facebook page, really that could play a much bigger role. But also the foot soldiers that really were in the trenches and those are connected to the community should be able to articulate those issues. I don't know whether they need help or in how to communicate or how to translate some of these things into simple, accessible language. That probably needs to be done. We've got a long way. Coming to government, giving that information, I think this is an argument that we've again talked about, is what is the role of the chief government spokesperson? And we have said that at the moment, that role seems to just have been bolted on. It's really not clear what that role is supposed to be. And besides, we also talked about, government is a very complex thing. There are a lot of cross-cutting issues. And for an individual who is, a minister as well, running a ministry, it's really, really unfair. And I want to believe that probably some of the ministers are not talking because they think, well, there is a government spokesperson. I think that structure needs to be looked at. It's very important to do that. Other than that, everything looks okay. It's set. It's moving across properly, but that communication is really, really important. For example, the issues on the copper bill. The president discussed that. There are a lot of technical issues. There are a lot of legal issues around it. But but surely there ought to be a better way probably of communicating that and to allay that anxiety among the people.
That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. Okay, let's move on to the second question. So that press conference, what are the takeaways from that press conference, Mr. Bimbe?
There are really, a lot of details which I'm not going to go through unless it's really necessary. However, my takeaway is, as Nokiwa has pointed out, we've had, a number of these narratives. So that gives us comfort that the president is still, on course. He's still sticking to the plan. He discussed a lot of things, and for a lot of things that were mentioned, which people such as the living cost of living crisis, the electricity, jobs, and all that, they depend on basically having a functioning economy. And for that, to me, is very important. He ably articulated that. And also, there's another aspect that he talked about was to do with the, when he talked about the Barroso issues and the foreign relations. He also mentioned about, being credible within the international space and also security. That also hinges on how much investment you can bring in, how much, even local investors could do business within the country, thus creating jobs. So those are the key takeaways from me. And yeah, I think it was very clear we are on course, really. Other than, again, what we talked about is the information is not filtering through correctly.
That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. Nukiwe, what are the takeaways from that powerful press conference by our president?
Look, apart from everything that has been said, I think one of the takeaways is something that the opposition also are trying to use against the UPND, which is our affiliation or association with the West, or the need for us to polish our image to the outside world. But it's very convenient because no one is talking about how damaged that was and how it's difficult to trade or even to make the country move into a positive space economically without mending those relationships, without having our creditors sit together around a table and give us some leniency, as it were. So for me, that was a big takeout in how well we are doing on that front. And like I said, funny enough, it's what some people in opposition want to use against this current government, which is quite rich. Because even if you look at a household, you can't function as a household in isolation. You can't have a broken home and not rely on neighbors or well-wishers, for that matter, to help you rebuild your house. You can't exist as an island. And unfortunately, some of these people that we've had to sit down with, some of these people that we've had to have MOUs with, they control the economy, the biggest economies in the world. And for us to be able to get into the positive space, we have to tap into those relations. It must also be said that I'm not pro-West or pro-China or whatever. I think we can sustain ourselves as Africans and as Zambians. I'm very pro-African and finding African solutions to African problems. But I think, like I said, we find ourselves in a very difficult situation where when something is broken, what's the first thing you do? You mend it first before you start building on it. And I do believe the first 5 years of the president, as he's articulated in his plans, will be heavy on the mending side of things. The first year, like I said, even in my previous submission, I see a lot of things that actually for those that have studied economics or for those that understand macroeconomics, it's amazing. It's unfathomable what he has done in this particular time. And what's really good about the achievements is that there's also been some social impact at the same time with the employment of teachers, and mostly you just get the one right and then the one happens organically, but he seems to be pushing from both the top and the bottom. So for me, the takeout was heavily those affiliations and how important they are. And again, like to my original point, I just really wish we can all articulate these things to the people so that they can see the vision and they can be part of the vision. Thanks.
That's fantastic, Nukiwe. But Mr. Bimbe, before we move on to the next question, I think Nukiwe has mentioned something very important here. You know, mending that is what is broken. As you all know, our economy was in ICU before we got that independence in April last year. And without, so what the most important thing in the UPND manifesto is to cure that economy and start growing it. And there've been a lot of questions and a lot of cries, propaganda from the opposition. People are suffering. There is no money in the economy, despite employing those thousands of civil servants. There's still youth who are unemployed. Things are so expensive. But HH said this economy, when we took over 15 months ago, somewhere there, it was growing at minus 2.8%. And now it has grown at 2%. So we're moving from minus 2.8 to 2%, which is in essence, the economy has grown by 5% in 15 months, which I've never heard about anything like that in the whole world. Even the British economy is not growing at 5%. So the question is, Mr. Bimbe, we've also talked about enabling environment, which is connected to the economy. So what can you advise the propagandists, the opposition, who are saying, jobs are not created, people are suffering? Can jobs be created without curing that economy, without curing that baby that is in the ICU? Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
Yes, thank you very much for that. It's very impossible, really, as you have articulated, without a functioning economy, without a functioning rules, within the environment, without having peace in that environment. I mean, it's totally impossible to do that. I have to say, though, that, in any democracy, we need a strong opposition. It's cardinal that the opposition is there to provide the necessary checks and balances. However, what we're seeing in Zambia is the opposition really are not doing that. All what we have is falsehood and misinformation. The other thing is also we need to go backwards and think, where are we coming from? The problem that we have. When you look at the chart that the president produced, which it looks at, how the economy was faring from Mwanawasa's time against the projected growth, you can see that during Mwanawasa, we were exceeding that growth. However, from 2011, we started going down. And by 2014, the dip was really, really high. And again, if you are a data person, you try to start asking questions and say, what happened in 2014 that we started going down? Of course, there were events that were happening within the ruling party at that time. Our president was not well. There could be some infighting within there. And, the eyes was taken out of, without looking at what was going on. And then by, 2016, 2015, it really dived. And then COVID came. It was already on its downward spiral, going as far as minus 3% growth. And since after the elections, we started growing again. Now, that tells you something, and which I believe the opposition should be candid enough and go back and just explain, what really happened. Why did we go down? I know they will argue that it was COVID, but when you look at the chart, COVID started when? Late 2019? By then, we're already in the negative. So I don't believe that. The problem is they messed up the economy, and we need to fix that. So from 2011 to 2021, that's 10 years. And then you expect the economy to just grow? Of course, it's growing to fix everything within a year and a half. That's impossible. And as Nokiwa has pointed out, it's about mending before you start building again. You need a strong foundation. So I feel bad to say that if the opposition doesn't put its house together, from the way the numbers are looking, they might not have space come 2023, going into 2026. They will have nothing to talk about. They will have, serious issues to discuss because they are not putting their house in order. For example, they need to just explain that, apologize. And we heard about the rebranding going on, which we haven't seen. And the whole argument for them is just pointing at one individual all the time, rather than, discussing real issues. I've seen a comment on here talking about why are we talking about the opposition. I think we have to remember that we cannot move forward without looking backwards. That's why we have history. The reasons why people here talk about, in most developed countries, talk about the Second World War and always doing all those remembrance is because we need to learn to go back so that we avoid the problems in the future. So as it is, we will continue to talk about the opposition and what they are doing because they are very inconsistent. Right now, they sent a petition, for example, to the U.S. Embassy. Now, now if you look at that, it's okay, they can do that, but it's a bit rich for an opposition that was in government that even kicked out the U.S. ambassador from Zambia to now go back and try to get answers. And then among that group, you have someone who was a chief, diplomat at one stage, who I think seems not to know how to do these things within that diplomatic circles. So, yeah, it worries me. But as we are all UPND sympathizers and part of the group that really put our efforts together to bring this government in place, I think I'll be happy with that, although I'll be worried that we might create a situation where we run into some sort of one-party state, although we are in a party state. However, I'm comforted that we have a very good leader, very listening leader, and a leader who is fearful, who looks to the law for everything doing legally, so we are safe on that. However, to put those really bedded in, the constitutional review which is going on, and the building of the all governance institutions will be key to that legacy, so that in the future we don't go back to where we were.
That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. And moving on to the next interesting question. You all listened to the press conference. And after the press conference, there is one former deputy minister in the previous notorious PF government, and he's also one of the aspiring candidates for the presidency of the party. He made a comment that how can you have a press conference without reshuffling the government or without making any changes? Now, the question to you, Mr. Bimbe, did the president miss an opportunity to reshuffle the pack? Over to you.
That's a difficult question and a very interesting one. I think my view on that is looking at the way the press conference went, I'm thinking it wasn't the correct forum or platform to do that. And that's my first point. I'm not saying the reshuffles were needed. The second part is every president in Zambia, because of our constitutional arrangement, is always, given a very bad hand in what he can or she can pick from as members of the cabinet. So our constitution says you have to get members of the cabinet from the pool of MPs. Now, that pool is very small. So the president has to pick from there. And then the other thing that you have to worry about, then there is this concept of balancing, regional balancing. That is another area that creates that problem. So having said that, I think probably they need a better way of working, or maybe it could be a situation where maybe there could be a little bit more training or for some of our operatives. I can understand if one talks about training in our culture, it means, well, you don't know anything, why are you getting trained again? But the world has moved on. There is lifelong learning. What you learned 6 months ago might not be applicable because of new technology, new ways of doing things. So we need to do that. Even in the civil service, there is what they call continuous professional development. So something like that, creating some of those programs, and maybe once a quarter they meet up, they discuss, they share notes, and maybe bringing experts to help with those kind of things would help in the interim. But as long as our constitution is like that, it will be very difficult. I would also want to think that going forward with the constitutional review, maybe, just maybe, we look to changing that constitution to really create that complete separation between the legislature and the executive, whereby we make sure that members of cabinet are selected from outside parliament. That way, the president then has a better hand, has a larger pool of experts and people that he can come to. But also that then creates a sense of accountability, because those members that are selected cannot take the position before going, say, for an interview by the members of parliament. That's one area. The other thing that creates is it avoids a rubber stamp legislature. So what I mean there is, because because ministers are selected from among the MPs, there is this idea that I should be always on the good side of the government. So when the government puts a bill, I'll have to support that, because if I don't, then I might not get that position as a minister. So in that way, unconsciously, actually, you can create a rubber stamp legislation, which you can avoid by separating these two together. So as it is right now, the president has got a limited pool he can choose from. And that was not a very good forum in the first place. But there are ways we can deal with that. And this, what I said, maybe some sort of, refreshers, just looking at how modern government operates now, and helping those colleagues to just, get a hold of their briefs.
That was fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. Nukiwe, what are your comments or sentiments on that?
So I have very different sentiments to Mr. Bimbe. Firstly, I do think, like in any organization, if you look at Zambia as an organization in which we have employed people to serve us, we demand that they are appraised. And for me, it baffles me that to date, only Dr. Magwende has lost his job in the New Dawn. Someone that I feel personally that something doesn't make sense, considering that there are so many people that are underperforming. And you must understand, we can only understand for so long as individuals. It's now 1 year, 3 months old. So how long do we keep using the excuse or the element of it being us fixing things or us having to bridge the gaps that the PF left? At what point are we supposed to take responsibility? I do think at the macro level, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of work to be done. So for me personally, I've got a lot of patience for the president. In fact, for me, my patience for him is 10 years. If after 10 years things are the same, then he too would have failed. But as you go down the chain, they have less and less work they have less and less fixing in inverted commas to be done. It now becomes the micro level. He's working at a micro level, mind you. It's big plans. It's plans that are long term, as they would call them, which is a year to 5 years to 10 years. Whereas everybody else will have those plans, but their deliverables are much shorter than that. So if in a ministry, in 1 year, 3 months, there hasn't been change, and in fact, it's been worse, then there's a problem there. And I do believe the president should have made some changes. You must understand that not everyone has been in government before. In fact, it's safe to say 80%, 70% of the ministers currently have never been in government before. So it's understandable in the beginning if they are learning the ropes, if they are understanding how civil service works, because civil service is not the same as private, or, it's public, and it's very different from private, in fact. So you can give people the leniency of the fact that they are waiting. They are learning. But a year and 3 months down the line to still have some conversations in the ministries that are currently happening, for me, is inexcusable. And I do think, as the leader of the cabinet, the president should and must do appraisals of his ministers and be able to appraise what changes they've done. It's possible that they've made a lot of good, but then again, like we said, communication is a challenge. But if me in my ministry, I see that government or the party or whoever is not communicating the good things that I'm doing, should it not be upon myself to find ways and means to communicate what it is that my achievements are? I think somewhere, somehow, there's something wrong with the dispensation between the minister and the president and his ministers, because I can't put my finger on it, but there's something that's not correct. There's something that's not kosher, And when you say about the pool of people to choose from, I'm ignorant of that rule or that fact. But I do think there's a lot of qualified people, just like they went into government or into ministerial positions without having prior experience. There's so many people that can do that job and can still do it better with the experience for that ministry. Look, I do think there's a lot of politics at play when it comes to these appointments. And I do worry that some of these politics is what's going to kill the efforts of the New Dawn. Because it's not necessarily about delivery, about who is. Look, I trust the president. I want to be very careful with what I'm saying right now. I trust his decisions, but right now, there's a lot of ministries that are just not ticking, if I can put it that way, that are just not ticking, and we need some reshuffles, because now, a year and 3 months into the mix of things, maybe it can be realized that some people are better off in other ministries than where they are right now. It's not even a matter of firing and hiring. No, it's a matter of reshuffling. Hey, I put you in this position. I thought you could do great, but I can see some shortcomings. You still have potential. Rather move to this other position or this other ministry. Look at Pilato's appointment and how it fits into, it fits like a glove. His appointment, we can all see he's got passion for it, and I do believe he's going to deliver on that, because it's him, you know. And there's no way the president could have gotten it right 1,000%. And I think a year, 3 months down the line is enough time to re-look at the decisions and make some reshuffles. When you speak about the press conference and it being the right platform or not, you must understand that whatever it is that the president speaks in the press conference is pre-decided. He doesn't decide there and then that I'm going to say this, this, and that. It's prepared. So if there was any reshuffles, it would have been done before the press conference. And if there were any reshuffles, anyone being reshuffled or fired or whatever would have known before the press conference. That press conference is for the president to speak to us as his people, us as the people that employed him. So we are not saying he should make it a debacle or a spectacle of firing and hiring like we've known in the past. No. What we are saying is he should make decisions in the background, speak to the stakeholders, and come and speak to us about the decisions he has made, just like he was giving us his feedback on the progress that he's made. So if you ask me, was that the place or not? That was the perfect place for him to make some changes to the cabinet, because it is about time, in my opinion. Thanks.
Okay, Nukiwe. So the only thing you've agreed, so you haven't even agreed even the platform. But Nukiwe, if you remember, before that press conference, the president appointed Pilato in the morning, and in the afternoon there was the press conference. But that's not my question. That's not the point I'm trying to drive home. I've got a question for you. You said there are some ministers or ministries that are underperforming. And so I want you to be specific. The first part of the question is, which ministries do you think they are underperforming, and why? And then two, it looks like our ministers don't have the KPIs. So what are you measuring? What is the benchmark you're using to come and tell us here that some ministers are not performing? Over to you, Nukiwe. That's your question, and I won't give it to Mr. Bimbe specifically for you.
Look, a very unfair question, because obviously, like you said, there is no KPI, so it would be very unfair of me to pinpoint specific people without an understanding of what their KPI is. I think Mr. Bimbe raised a very cardinal point earlier on, where he said he mentioned with regards to the Ministry of Information that perhaps we don't understand the deliverable for that ministry, because as we've known it before, it's not doing that. But for me to say the minister is underperforming, I think would be unfair without understanding what her key deliverables are. However, there are certain ministries that are easier to deliberate on. And these are ministries that pertain to delivery of services to the local and to the people on the ground. Okay, so for example, agriculture. We all know the reasons why things failed, but it doesn't make it any less that they failed. You know what I mean? So we may have explanations of saying, yeah, no, we couldn't deliver on time because of 1, 2, 3, fair and good. But did you not plan in advance? Did you not know that you are redoing the FISP? Did you not know or foresee the challenges that were going to come? For me, in my opinion, that's underperformance. Because as a director of a business, you don't have a second chance to, you know, when a horse is dead, it's dead. You know, people, they didn't get their fertilizer on time. Someone must take responsibility for it. There's a difference between explaining something and making an excuse for something. An explanation would have been done even before the delay itself. When something comes after the fact, it's an excuse. So for me, it's those things where what is the mandate of this ministry and what has been the actual performance without any excuses on that particular ministry. And I think there's a number of ministries that one can mention. But like I say, I think it would be unfair without having a full understanding of what that ministry's responsibility, deliverable is, and without having full information, because there's information black hole somewhere that we may not necessarily know what these ministries are doing or ministers are doing. So yeah, please don't put me on the spot to mention specific ministries, but I think that example covers it. If the ministry does not deliver on its mandate, for me, that's failure, and it needs to be acknowledged. Thanks.
That's fantastic, Nokiwe. We've been joined also by another Bakwetu TV crew member and our one of the regular people on this show, Mukelevai, welcome. Mukelevai, I just want you to comment on this question. The president at the press conference on the 20th, which is just a few days ago, 6 days ago, and a lot of opposition people. We don't want to talk about opposition. One of the opposition members, former minister, deputy minister, who is aspiring to be a president, said the president missed an opportunity to reshuffle the government. How can you have a conference without a reshuffle? Do you think the president missed an opportunity, and why? And if you do, why?
Thank you
Over
very
to
much.
you, Mukelebai.
Thank you very much, and good evening, panelists, and good evening, viewers. Well, us Zambians, we are known for being impatient. Right now, we can tell from what is currently taking place. I don't think HH missed it. You know, these guys are simply tabala pola nemi komboya wataila pona. They are just babies who were just born yesterday. And people are expecting them to start running and grow fully grown teeth. That is unfair. And the people that are busy speaking the most are these guys in the opposition who failed to deliver on time themselves. It took them 10 years. And within 10 years, as Zambians, you saw what we did. We terminated their contract without notice. They thought they were going to continue lying to us, but we saw them through. They were incompetent. So my question is, why should we believe? Why should we get advice from people that failed to deliver? What is it they're going to do? That they're going to do when we bring them back that they failed to deliver in 10 years. 10 years is not a day. 10 years is not 14 days in government. We are being impatient. They are being impatient because we are used of this habit of wanting a result, instantaneous result. Apopene before tamulachita na kubomba. And that's why you saw that when they got money from these international countries, foreign countries, that money, instead of money going back and being injected in projects, went straight into their pockets. And what do you see? Within few months, we see them distributing. When we are lacking money, there was lack of money in circulation. But because their interest, they want to see short results immediately. And we saw the way they were spending. And the Zambians, all Zambians are witnesses. And I don't understand why we Zambians, we are failing to question these people. What is it that you are going to do different? And where did you take, why are we not developed with the ideas that you keep on giving us? You are busy condemning someone who is still teething. Iwewe wakula with wisdom, with a lot of wisdom teeth, you are failing. You failed. And then you want to say, now come here, I'm an expert. We don't get advice from incompetent people. So these chaps who are busy gallivanting the street and showering the Zambian people with propaganda and negating or refusing or implanting the seeds of hate and falsehood into our communities, which I believe most of the people are buying it. They're busy buying it. And they're forgetting where we came from. So our president was not wrong for reshuffling. Why should we rush them? He wants to see how these colleagues are performing. To him, I believe, because he works close to with these guys. To him, in his mind, with his team, they are doing something that is very, very important. And we should just be patient. Then we will yield good dividends. Firing, because that's what we want to see. The president punishing because Minister of Information is not up to date. Because there's so much Facebook. People are believing in Facebook. Mwalipata no kutamba ZNBC. You go to Facebook, mrefu wa Chilufya tayari. You are forgetting that information is gotten from those government institutions. That's where we find information. But we would rather close that idea and go to get information from Facebook. That's why we are being misled, Chilufya. So I believe that the president is on the right trajectory and is doing the right thing, observing and advancing. He's observing and is advancing at the same time. And you will see reshuffles when need arises. Not now. It's too early and still premature. That's my take.
Thank you so much, Wom Kelebai. Mr. Bimbe, before we move on to the next question, or even Nukiwe, I think this question was asked. I don't know whether it was asked, but the opposition, most of the opposition members, leaders, actually, people aspiring to become presidents in the notorious PF, they are saying, despite the government even increasing the CDF to 25.6 million to 1.5 million, they are saying there's no money in circulation. What is your comment, Mr. Bimbe? Is it true that there's no money in circulation? Or why do you think they are saying there's no money in circulation? Over to you.
Thank you very much. So before I answer that question, I'll just like to go back to this reshuffling. The reason I thought it wasn't really a good forum is I think the key thing that we need as a government is to lay the foundation, to talk through that so that the discussion is centered around that. I do appreciate the way we do our politics and information giving in Zambia. Is like if the reshuffle was to happen at that point, we would have lost the vibrant discussion that we need to give that narrative that the government on. The news would have been something else, as we've seen, which we're going to talk about earlier on. The other thing, which again, my sister Nokio has pointed out, is the lack of KPIs. We know the functional areas of those ministries at the high level, yes. However, we don't know what it is that they are supposed to be their deliverables. I'll just give an example where the Minister of Health was really castigating journalists for not looking for information so that they report correctly. To me, I'll say that's a bad politics, because if the government doesn't create an information black hole, speculation will happen. I don't see where the problem is if you just provide that information in some sort of, public way, and then journalists will pick it up and write stories based on what they have. It's not a matter of where the minister should ask journalists to go and look for information. I think that's the wrong way of doing things. So a lot of these perceived or real incompetencies or lack of delivery, I think has to also to do a lot with the lack of information. There is an information black hole, and that needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now. With regards to this sentiment of there's no money in circulation, one thing I would say is we are slowly getting to the real economy. Zambia, I think in the past 10 years or so, we were running a fake economy, really. There was so much money all over that is not backed by production. Where that money was coming from, we don't know. But now we learn that some of this money, really, we are not paying our debts. And that money was being used for, silly things. That's why we saw money in circulation. And also there is a mentality issue where we think seeing the cash is the way that we know there's money in circulation. So, for example, we saw our friends in the PF carrying cash to go and pay for their nomination fees, which again gives that impression that there is no money in circulation. But above all, the reason why they are using that line is because most of them were suppliers. And then this audit that is going on, they want to be paid. They want that rushed so that they are paid the money. But we've heard all this, the president's sentiment that, some of them supplied air. Some of these contracts were overvalued, overpriced. So that's why the audit is going on. So those who supplied genuinely, the contracts were okay, they will be paid. So I don't subscribe to that idea that having cash in the economy floating around is a sign that there is money in the economy. I don't subscribe to that. So that would be my probably response to that. You are muted, Mr. Chilufya.
Oh, sorry about that. We just some issues this side. Yeah, that was a fantastic answer, Mr. Bimbe. And you've talked about the vacuum. So is there a need for, in the UK, whatever you need to apply for a passport, to apply for winter support, everything, you find them on one central portal, e.gov. Don't you think we need a central portal where all that information, like the press conference the president had, there was so, those lovely charts, information. Anthony Bwaria sent me, all those statistics. Fantastic. But don't you think, apart from, because Facebook, once you put information on Facebook, it's not going to be stored for 10 years or 20 years. But if the information is on a government portal, it can stay for so long. Don't you think we need a central government portal where all ministries can put that information? Over to you. I'll come back to you, Nukia.
Yes, you need that. And besides, you also need people that can speak within each, service delivery units, be it a government, be it a Kwango. You need people that can speak. You need, we've talked about it, and kudos to my brother, Pilato. You know, he's just been appointed, but he's given a roadmap, and he's given what he thinks should be achieved. That way, people can measure that. I mean, of course, he needs to elaborate further so that we can look at those metrics and see what is it that he's going to deliver. So at the end of the day, we needed at the starting point, once the manifesto has been translated into policy, there needed to be those deliverables that are publicly available, and then probably have some sort of a dashboard or whatever you want to do to tick as things are going. At the moment, the president just, you know, issues some, you know, statistics here and there, which, you know, statistics, you give someone statistics, that's just a final version. So people want to see the data that generated the statistics to be able to understand what it is that they are measuring. So having a single place, what I'll call, you know, a single source of truth is very important. Then the government is more proactive in providing that, Frank Mutubira mentioned, the visibility. You cannot have visibility in a government if there's information black hole. That needs, we don't need even the freedom of information to get that, because freedom of information is another aspect which doesn't deal with how the government provides that information. That's public information. A government is chosen by the people to represent them. So therefore, why hide the information? Just put it there. Then people will be able to see what is going on and say, okay, the Ministry of Health said, you know, each hospital will have drugs, this sort of drugs. These are the levels that we have. And based on that, the hospital themselves can even have those statistics and say, this is how far we are within the drug. Within the procurement, we can see which orders have been put in place, you know, where they are, who is delivering what. Then that way we'll be able to measure and say, hold on, you said you're going to deliver this, say, for example, the fertilizer at this point, but up to now, you haven't updated that. We don't see it. So this is going to cause a problem. So citizens can help actually prompt the government, and even the government with that kind of ability, if they are able to be doing that, you know, some of this information could come up and say, oh, hold on, there is a problem here we need to fix. But the way it is, there is just nothing. And we rely too much on Facebook, which is an ephemeral media. Once you put something there, it just lost in ether. And also, you know, Facebook, Twitter, all social media, they're amplifiers. They are not specifically good at persisting the knowledge. You need to have a place where you can persist this. I can go back, look at that information, compare it with whatever existed before, and work out, this is what they said they'll deliver. This is where we are. They said they'll deliver by this time, but it's not still there. So yes, we really do need that, and we need it immediately, actually.
That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. So look here, Mr. Bimbe, as we've talked about the central portal, or the place where information can be put there, and also he's talked about have the need to have KPIs for ministers, and even if they've put the information on that portal, there is also need to have comparable data. It's like what Mr. Bimbo was saying. Somebody will come and tell you today that there's no medication in the hospital, or there is no this. This person should also provide how much medication was there a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's when we are going to be able to know that what we have compared to what we had the last 5 years is not normal. Just like the president, when the president was saying the economy has grown. He didn't just say the economy has grown by 5% or 2%. He explained the economy was, when we took over, it was -2, minus 2.8%. Now it's 8%, it's 2%, which means it has grown by almost 5% from negative to positive. Nukiwe, do you think because there's a vacuum there, this is why now the opposition are taking advantage and use propaganda to fill that vacuum? Over to you.
Great. So firstly, as one who volunteered in media and yourself, Mr. Patrick, one thing we can acknowledge is that even then, we were always on a back foot when it came to information dissemination. It was always reacting to propaganda. And one thing that the PF knew how to maneuver is that he who owns the information dissemination platforms owns the narrative. What they did not foresee, which is to Vom Keleba, is Keleba, back to your point when you say Facebook is not a place for media or for getting information. It is this Facebook that was the best tool that we had as media volunteers to disseminate information and to say the correct things that we needed to say. What used to happen then is you try to get people on the radio stations, they are all fully booked by PF. You try to get people on TV stations, they are all fully booked by PF for an unforeseeable future with no slots being used. It was always fully booked if you ever wanted to get someone to give your view. So the reason I'm saying all that is that in opposition, it felt like as media volunteers or as a media team, we were on a back foot, but it seems we are also on a back foot in government. The problem is not the Facebooks or the Twitters or the everything. It's the running of the mechanism that is in charge of informing citizens of the truth. When we say there should be a central point, there is a central point. ZANIS is a central point. ZANIS is that focus that gives us information as a country. And it's up to now the people around ZANIS or the ministries to drive the people or to drive the stakeholders to the right source of information. Right now, Facebook is the only thing we have. And pages are mushrooming every day. Fake news is mushrooming every day. But what is Zicta doing? What are the consequences of posting fake news? I keep saying the previous regime or those that were good at propaganda in the previous era, they have not gone to sleep. If anything, they've got nothing to lose by pushing and propagating more now than then. What is our reaction to that? What is our plan around people and elements that propagate and that cause false alarm to the nation? Surely for someone to be charged with defamation of character when they're inciting soldiers and inciting this and this is laughable. Can we not find things that stick and make people an example to not incite the nation with false news? And one thing that we have, or the gift that we have as Zambians, is the ability to be very convincing with little or no facts. I can come here and I can speak very convincingly of something I know nothing about. But because of that vacuum, everyone just goes to wherever they think they can get meaning about things that are affecting their lives. Back to the point where we speak of the media, it seems sensationalism sells. And now you've got a media that is more opinionated than reporting what happened, because what happened is boring. So if the president said 1, 2, 3, it's boring to just say the president said 1, 2, 3. Would rather say the president said 23, 24, 25, and then in a small portion at the bottom say he said 1, 2, 3. So there's a lot of things when it comes to information that personally I believe are not okay. There's cyber laws that are not being used, and it's not necessarily a bad law, but it's just not being used for the intended purpose, and that's why you've got all this propaganda. I often join forums on Twitter, which are very good. They are called Spaces, and Diamond TV is very, very good in having those spaces. You'll be amazed things that how people think and feel and understand about things that are going on those spaces. But honestly speaking, the fault is not on the people that are making those platforms. It's the people that are supposed to be disseminating this information that are not, because the mechanisms are there, the platforms are there, but the drivers are too busy politicking and fighting for roles and opportunities. Thanks.
Well, thanks a lot, Nokiwe. Mr. Bimbe, let's move on now to the next question. We're moving quicker now.
Yeah.
The next question is: you watched that press conference. What was the reaction? What do you think was the reaction from the opposition and the public at large, the citizens? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me just also clarify one thing. I think what I meant when we lack this single source of truth is more looking at, for example, having information about what is going on in the government, how people can access the government, having like an online portal similar to what most democracies will have, where citizens can go to and get all the information they need. So you have, for example, if you say your inflation has gone down from point A to point B, that's just a conclusion. However, what one wants is, say, maybe the statistics agency, or I don't know, Zamstats, provide the background data and make it open access so that people can see that and be able to work out and whether agree or disagree with the government. Facebook and social media can be used to amplify that information and say, oh, this is what has happened, and here is the detail if you want the background information, so that anybody can go there and check that information. And I think in the 8th National Development Plan, there is something called data collection, dissemination, and dashboards. And I want to believe that is still on course, although I haven't heard much about that. I think that is very, very important. In the US, they've got gov.us. In the UK, they've got gov.uk, where everything is for, plans, press statements, what is going on, statistics, everything is just there. And then for us foot soldiers, we would use that information to craft the messages that we can then push onto Facebook, or Zanis can do that. One other thing that we need to also look at is we need to be very careful with where we are coming from. Anything that is propagated by a government media outlet is normally taken as propaganda. So to fight that, you need, whatever you say has to be backed by data somewhere. It has to be somewhere. Governments sit on a lot of data, a lot of information that is just in silos. It's in cupboards or in people's hard drives or whatever. That can be put in some place, of course, curated in a nice way, so that citizens are able to access that. On the reactions, it's really mixed. Of course, we talked about the reactions from the opposition. As usual, they'll pick out small statements here and there, and then write so much around one single statement, and then they lose the context. So in other words, as Nokiwe has pointed out, they are very, very good at that propaganda. So they can pick a single statement, remove the context around it, and then wrap it with another context. And I hate to say this word, information seeking and digital literacy levels, as well as just the culture of reading, is quite bad in our country. We prefer small, short things, but those small, short things, statements, they have to be crafted in a way that you remove the ambiguities. But the opposition are very good at twisting a lot of things. And there's also another aspect that is at play is the chasing of likes and followers. So again, as Nuki has rightly pointed out, bad news or sensational news, gives you that ability. And how to counter that, I think we need to find a better way of crafting that, having, scripts that when someone is speaking, they're all speaking on the same hymn sheet. They can just paraphrase. We keep that. It's not controlling, it's just managing that information flow properly. Scanning the social media and some of the online publication, there is really a mixed kind of reactions, and I think the majority is on the positive. They are happy with the removal of the defamation of the president, although I'm not a lawyer. There are lawyers that say, well, there are still remnants of that act that need to be completely expunged from the statute. So that is something I leave it to those people who have law. But to me, that actually removes one of that leverage that the opposition had for them to say whatever they can say so that they can be arrested. Because what that created was a situation where the police were actually tied. They couldn't overlook that because the UPND activists will say, why is the police not acting? Someone has done, and they will report, because that's what our law says, you need to report. But as well, if they arrest the other people that have said that, they'll claim persecution, and that's the narrative that they've been playing. So by removing that, then that leverage is actually removed, which is a good thing. The president has shown so many times he's got a thick skin. He doesn't react, and when he reacts, he's calm and factual to clear that air. So I hope other members of the UPND would follow through. Although already I'm seeing certain things, threats being issued. For example, the PF are trying to organize a protest on the Copper Belt. And I've seen UPND activists saying, they will fight that. I think that's also really, really bad. That also plays into the hands of the opposition. I think there are better ways, as the president has said. We need to talk. We can't always use a gun or fight or use the courts to deal with differences. We need to sit down and talk. And I believe that's the way it's supposed to be. So the majority of citizens are really on board with what has been said. Although, as we've said earlier, a little bit more detail is needed, a little bit more information, and fixing that information vacuum will be important to also remove this, the opportunities to peddle falsehoods.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. On the issue of information or one-stop portal for information in Zambia, here is Petronella Chishimba. I agree with Mr. Bimbe. Right now, I don't even know of any portal or fora where, as a citizen, I can formally write or react to political pronouncements. So this person sounds like one of us UPND sympathizers. And then there's this guy Jai Siavusu. He says there was a report. We're gonna talk about this at the end of this before we end the Thabo Kawana issue. So this guy is saying it was reported, which I saw in the press, that he's been fired. And this guy went around looking for information whether this was true. And this was reported by Watchdog. Watchdog said fake news. So if this fake news, what are the consequences of such news on the big platform? So that's not a question, Mr. Bimbe. We're talking about a vacuum somewhere there, or without having a portal, one-stop portal, where people can find information. This person looked everywhere to see if it's true that Mr. Kawana has been fired. So Nukiwe and Mukelebai, I'm gonna give you time to comment and ask questions at the end. We've got only 2 questions to go. We're trying to move with time because there's another program coming up in the next 1 hour or so. Yeah. So let's move on, Mr. Bimbe. The next question I have for you. We've been talking about the press not being fit for purpose for a long time, just like we've been talking about lack of information dissemination in our government. How did the press fare this time? Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
Oh, thank you very much for that question. Yeah, I think from the previous, or rather the first press conference I watched, I was really shocked by the level of questions that the press posed to the president. This particular press conference, I think it was handled very well. The press had very, very, very good questions. And as I said earlier, the bulk of the press conference actually was answering to those questions. There were really difficult questions. For example, the Barotseland issue, which we all know is a very, very difficult one. The relation between USA and China, why are we exporting electricity instead of, supporting the local people first? So they were really well thought out, and I think I really congratulate them for being on the ball and being in the current, in the now, to ask those kind of pertinent questions. And I hope that continues. What is basically just lacking is, though they asked those questions, which was brilliantly, it never followed through in the what was being reported and being written about. So I miss those days when we had Times of Zambia or Daily Mail or even the Post. There were really good opinion pieces, coached with really good analytical mind to those kind of things. We are lacking that now. So the press, in a nutshell, fared very, very well this time around.
Fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. And Nukiwe, Mr. Mukeleva, I haven't forgotten about you. I'll be coming to you very soon. Whilst we are debating the legacy of HH and UPND government, if it's on course or possible derailment, then this morning we heard about a story regarding one of our soldiers from the opposition, part of the alliance, who is now a director of information at one of the ministries, and is no other than Tabo Kawana. Tabo Kawana's story has gone viral this morning, that he bought a brand new car for his wife as Christmas present, and apparently some of his relatives took the pictures, and without his knowledge, those pictures were posted on social media and they went viral, and they've been received with mixed feelings by both the public and even some of our UPND members. I saw one MP, who I don't want to mention the name, lambasting Mr. Kawana for doing that. Now, Mr. Bimbe, what is your comment? And can this have a negative impact on the legacy of HH and UPND we've been talking about? Over to you.
Well. Yeah. So before I really dwell deeper into that, I really need to be clear that he's done very well to buy his wife a brand new car. That's a well thought out gift. And at the same time, I'm also of the view that, you know, that's his private matter. He's got the right to do that. However, where I have the problem is he's a media person. He's a communication person. And also, he's a political appointee. He's not a pure civil servant, which means he got there to be able to do that because of being a political appointee. Now, being a media person, really, he should have judged it very, very well. Because in politics, perception is a very, very tricky thing. It's very, very important. So I've seen arguments for saying, well, he can afford, what is it wrong with that? He got a loan. But hold on. Yes, he got a loan. But how did he get a loan? He got a loan because he's got a job. He's a civil servant. Right? If he were a civil servant that went through the normal channels, employed directly as a civil servant, rose through the ranks, did what he did, I have no problem with that. He is a political appointee, which means people are looking to him as a leader because he was part of the group that said, vote for us. We are able to do ABCD. Now, to do that and splash that publicly, he should have known that these pictures are going to go. He should have done it privately anyway, without, say, probably tell his family, please, this is private. Then that is fine. So to me, that's a lack of judgment. And in most countries, when you become the story, rather than the important things that the president discussed being, talked about, then the narrative of what the government is trying to give the people is actually diminished. So I do agree with the honorable MP who said that has actually removed some of the momentum that the UPND government has done. So in most countries, say for example in the UK, if you become the story, then you step out because that is a distraction. It was unnecessary. He shouldn't have done that. And to be honest, it's not the first time that he's really misjudged the moment. And he's come out sometimes, he's very good, but he's come out sometimes to be arrogant, patronizing. And that is not very good because that's exactly what used to happen in the PF. And people are wounded. The second part is, there is a cost of living crisis. People are going through difficulties. And then you have someone who's been appointed by the president showing that, hey, look at me, everything is fine with me. I'm able to buy this expensive machine for my wife. I think it just doesn't go very well with the people. So those are small things that I feel as UPND, we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot when things are just going a little bit good and suddenly, some crazy thing happen just like that. So, I don't have a problem with him buying a car for his wife. That's okay. But it's the way it's been done. That's what the problem is.
Okay, that's fantastic. Nokiwe,
Yeah, so I do think this Thabo Kawana issue is a classic example of a lot of things that we've just spoken about in the last hour and a half. Firstly, is the propaganda around the issue, which started with people saying the car is 58,000, 62,000. I mean, it just takes a few Google clicks, to see the actual price of that car. Whilst it's a very good car and commendable to him for buying it for his wife, it's still an entry car into the market. So it's not as expensive. If anything, it could be like half the price of what everyone is saying. So that's point number one, where if you even look at where this story broke, it broke on the opposition pages. So I always tell myself, wherever you hear the story first, you have to be careful about what narrative that person or that publication is trying to push. So already seeing that post yesterday, you already could see where it was going. In this particular case, my sentiments are very similar to Mr. Bimbe. In a world where we're telling people to just hang on, tighten their belts, yes, we know the money is not as easily accessible as it was before, but it's because we're fixing things. Morally speaking, splurging like that would not have been right, except even though it's very right and very good for him to spoil his wife. However, with all of this said, I think for me, it points to the fact, in conclusion, is that even he sees all of this. Even he agrees that this wouldn't be morally right. And in his feedback or his response, he said he didn't do it. So I think on my side, I would like to believe that no honorable or well-meaning Zambian and government official, for that matter, would have deliberately posted such pictures showing off. And I would like to believe his version that these were leaked, especially considering that they came up or popped up on opposition pages and not on his own. So I think in this case, we can put the matter to rest, because we are all we all agree, and so does he. So I think all is well that ends well. I hope his message of apology and correcting the narrative will reach the places where that message would have injured people, and they would see that his response is setting the record straight. Thanks.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Nukiwe and Mr. Bimbe. And I think the reaction was split into people saying Tabo didn't do anything wrong, and some people are saying that was bad, and then there are some people are saying that car is, we've got our friend here, Kelvin Chandakafuimbi, says that car is very cheap. Yeah, but the point we're trying to drive home, somebody was trying to drive home here is, and somebody was also said is not a political appointee, but the point is Thabo Kawana is known to have been in the opposition, and he was known to be in the trenches fighting with the UPND as an alliance, and he's a government official. So some people are saying whether he's political appointed or civil servant, he shouldn't have done that, because people are complaining that things are bad. The economy is tight. The economy is tough, and by somebody flashing, those cars, just gave the opposition opportunity to attack us. But the most important point is Thabo has apologized, and he has also explained that he's not the one who posted those pictures. There's some relatives who posted it, and as Nukiwe said, that story is as good as history. Let's forget about that and move on. Yeah. So Nukiwe, while you're still there, we talked about other things. Any closing remarks? Hello, Nukiwe.
Yes, sorry, I'm still here. So I think Mr. Bimbe was checking on my notes, because in all his past submissions since the last time I spoke, I completely agree with him. Those would have been my comments as well. And so for that reason, I would not have any new closing comments, but other than just thank you for having me on this platform. Being on the same platform as Bo Mukeleva is huge for me. I watch you all religiously, and I love your submissions. So it's really a privilege that I was able to participate in this program today. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Bo Mukeleva, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, before you comment on what the last two questions or so, do you think Otago would have been more sympathetic to the poor Zambians for for the fact that car leaked to the media? It shouldn't have been in the media. What do you think?
Well, I think if he had control to who was taking the picture and who was to share it, then I would say yes, that was wrong. But if he had no control, he was not the one at fault, and we cannot deter him from buying gifts for his family. That's his prerogative. So on that one, I know it does not go well, like everyone has put it here to say. We are here trying to fight the overspending and the flashing of your flashing monies or properties. We saw what was happening from the previous regimes that we don't even know how they acquired. They came into politics very poor, and then suddenly we start seeing them buying properties that are unexplainable with an explainable amount, or their companies started making 100%, 2000 profits. So when we come in, we should come in with clean hands and be careful. It doesn't mean that we should also stop buying present for our families. But when we do such things, we do it in a very moderate way that uh, we don't try to behave or to be seen as hypocrites, that we are not practicing what we preach. Otherwise, the intentions were good. It's a pity that somebody got the pictures and published it. But the gentleman himself has, I believe, written a letter to the public to apologize, even to the president, that it was not in his intention to do such a thing. And uh, now that the apology has been said, and he also takes it as it's a wrong thing to do, then who are we to start speculating? Do we want him to be punished further when we know that he is not the causer of all this? As Lukiwe put it, that it mushroomed from the opposition. I believe those are the chaps that have even spread out this issue to go viral. So he is okay. And for me, it's okay. It's okay that this matter is put to rest, but we should just try to be very careful, because I don't anticipate to see Wakainde buying a jet because he can afford it in $1 million, and then he said, "Now I want to be." And how are people going to? And yet he wants to sell the other presidential jet that was suspected to be proceeds of crime. So we have to be very careful and mindful in what we relate ourselves to. So on that aspect, I believe we should just give our brother a benefit of doubt. And since he apologized and he conceded that it was a mistake, so that's okay for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mr. Mukelebai. Yeah, it's very clear that Tabo, we all human, and we bound to err, but Tabo has apologized for that, and he has also clearly stated it wasn't his intention to do that, and he should be forgiven, and the president shouldn't fire him, or whoever permanent secretary or minister in that ministry shouldn't fire him. We all make mistakes, but what we need to do is we need to be very careful. We need to be sympathetic to the people who voted for us, and also we have to be very careful with our enemy, the opposition. They are very, very good at propaganda. That's the only thing they know. So, Mr. Bimbe, as we go towards the end of this program, and your closing remark, do you think this opposition we have at the moment is fit for purpose? And secondly, there is a possibility that this opposition might crumble very soon, which will leave us a one-party state. Is that good for our democracy? Over to you.
First and foremost, thank you very much, my sister Makiwe. I hope you will be joining us so often. You've got a breadth of knowledge, and being one of those people that were in the trenches, I think you understand the context more as well. So it was really nice having you on the show, and I look forward for you to join us again in another time. It will be really, really good, and I'm really learning. I've learned a lot from you today, so that was fantastic. Womukelevai, as usual, thank you very much for joining us today. And I was asking Mr. Chilufya whether you will be around. Thank you very much. Just to conclude, on the vehicle thing, again, I would have to reiterate that, I mean, pushing the blame to other people is really a lame excuse. The reason I'm saying that is, in these days of cameras and everything, those pictures were taken in a showroom. What do you expect? Why didn't they just deliver the vehicle to the house and forget about it? So that is, I know it's posterity, but as a media communication specialist, you should have been aware of that. I think it needs to be talked to, and probably also maybe go for skills training to know, just understand how to, to do things. When you communicate things, don't do things differently. There was an issue with HHS Sun fees at one time. So these things are going to happen. So we just need to be careful on this. So I hope with that apology, somehow he's learned a lesson not to misjudge these things. You don't just trust people by that. So he should have taken control of that situation in that matter. With regards to the opposition, I really don't see them. I mean, look, the biggest opposition right now is PF, going by the number of MPs they have in parliament. However, a lot of these members of parliament in PF are not probably sympathetic to their party, except for a few of them who were probably in government. Maybe they've got something to hide, maybe they've got something to fear. So that's why I see this situation where, rather than, some of the questions, for example, the petition that they are taking to they've taken to the US Embassy, those are issues that they could have raised on the floor of the House, so that the Speaker can ask the substantive ministers to issue kind of a ministerial statement, but they didn't. So that tells me things are not well within the PF parliamentary party, which is really tricky. Coming towards the elections, there could be a lot of people moving, shifting camps. It's just that their constitution doesn't allow. The other thing is also there's this shifting of the way they are trying to look at the elections of their party. They are, things are coming out, their hidden agenda of having, the former president come in, and also so that is going to cause them a lot of problems, I guess. So at the moment, really, in my conclusion, I think the opposition are losing it. They could have worked together, they could have done things better, but the checks and balances that they claim to provide are really, really shoddy. I know people say, why do you always talk about the opposition? We need to remind ourselves where we are coming from. History is important, and we will continue to remind them that the same people that messed up the economy, the same people that created an environment that bred the cadres, I know cadre is a good name, but the brutal cadres, people being maligned for belonging to a particular tribe or region, we can't just forget that. What about the relationship, which Nukio has mentioned, with other countries? That was down. So we can't just forget that. We need to talk about it. And that, to me, I thought would have been some of the areas that they could have said about. And the other thing is the checks and balances that they offer, should be issue-based. You cannot always talk about one individual all the time. They need to start providing the real checks and balances. As a government in waiting, how can they do it better? How can they deal with the date crisis that they created themselves? The crisis they've created on the copper belt, how would they deal with them? How about coming out and saying, guys, we are sorry, probably we should have done it better? So those are things that they need for them to be able to come out and say, and then we'll respect them as, yes, this is, a real opposition. As for now, I don't think they are really fit for purpose.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bimbe, for that closing remark. Nukiwe, thank you so much for coming. This is your platform. As you said, we work together in the trenches to make sure that this government is best. Now that we've got a baby that is growing up under 5, actually not even 5 years, under 5, still taking under 5 injections, we need to support this government and make sure that that baby at least reaches 10 years. And Mukelevai, I don't even have to say anything. Thank you so much for coming, and your contributions are valued. Mr. Bimbe, thank you so much. Our viewers, I can see we are viewers from all over the world. Thank you so much for your viewership. Please continue watching this program. Continue listening to our program. We are not here to we're just here to make our opinions, and you are all welcome to come and join us, and also raise your opinions. Talk about our country. We need to work together and develop this country. This country was in ICU. The economy was in ICU. Now that economy has started to coming out of that ICU, because the current government is putting things in place. One, repairing the economy, making an environment conducive for the economy to grow, to flourish, for investors to come, and for jobs to be created. So let's work together, one Zambia, one nation, and develop our country. And to everybody who is watching, I will just say Merry Christmas and wish you a blessed 2023. And thank you so much for viewing. Good night and bye for now.